fantastic. This is GT racing right now.
He's got traction, he's got rhythm, both of them! Maloney!
Oh, he's taken Anderson! Anderson's up top here!
Oh my god! Oh. Big crash! Oh my goodness, half the field's gonna get rolled!
Second's very close. These guys are want to make their way through the field very quickly.
Oh,
This is it! This is over! I can't believe this! Oh my god!
God, what?
It's time for the series on iRacing that pits our best talent from the virtual world and it pits them against the quickest in the real world. Welcome to the Glen, Watkins Glen International. It's located 4 hours west of the Big Apple in New York City itself. It hosts week 11 action of Just Send It. Welcome along to the SimSpeed Esports Network, whether you're joining us on Motorsport TV or any other associated platforms. Today, our field will drive the 2017 Ford GTE around this 5.3 kilometer circuit that is Watkins Glen. It's 3.3 miles depending on your units of choice. There are the details up on screen. It's a clockwise layout is Watkins Glen. Now, this circuit, of course, the classic boot layout that we use today, incorporates 11 corners, and it is an elegant roller coaster that has existed since the 1950s. You can see the track map up on screen. We do not use the inner loop that is in between turns 4 and 5, otherwise known as the bus stop, of course. And the NASCAR layout, after the carousel at turn 5 and that outer loop, the NASCAR layout actually rejoins the racetrack at turn 9, but we're going to use the complete classic boot like we said, and it's going to be a blast from the past here on SimSpeed TV. Good evening, everybody. Good morning, good afternoon from wherever you join us out there in the world virtually. It's Jonathan Simon in the commentary booth alongside Lachlan Mansell. Jay Kennedy is behind the scenes in production. And Lachlan, welcome to Watkins Glen. Welcome to another week of Just Send It. And it's a circuit that has hosted many famous motor racing series in the past.
Good evening to you, Jonathan. Good evening, everybody, whether you're tuning in on the Just Send It Facebook page, on SimSpeed TV, or for the first time on motorsports.tv. Great to have your company this evening, and you're 100% correct. This American circuit has hosted many events, including NASCAR races and also a round of the Formula One World Championship, the American Grand Prix from 1961 through until 1980. Jonathan's already run you through the track layout that we're going to be using this evening, but it's a circuit that has lots of elevation changes, some very heavily banked corners, and it's a circuit where slipstreaming is going to be absolutely critical in tonight's 40-minute race.
And the beauty of iRacing is that every single track is laser scanned to millimeter perfection. So every bump out there is as you see it in the real world. Every curb out there is as you see it in the real universe. And of course, 43 meters of elevation change to be specific, as Lachlan said. Plenty of cambered corners as well as we described. And most of all, Lachlan, it's a circuit. And this is the beauty of simulation racing. It's a circuit that we have a lot of Australians and New Zealanders out there. Scott Andrews and Justin Ruggier, two real-world drivers, also taking to the virtual racetrack this afternoon. But it's a circuit that they might not be familiar with in the real world, but they're very familiar with on the sim, which is the beauty of virtual racing.
Well, that's the great thing about iRacing. Literally from the comfort of your own bedroom or lounge room, you can race in all these amazing and very famous racetracks right around the world, many of which have featured in the first 11 weeks of the Just Send It series.
And you saw the race format up earlier. It's a 40-minute event coming up. We're going to expect one competition caution, and there it is on screen. That will be in play sometime randomly throughout the event. But most of all, Lachlan, we're expecting one pit stop for these drivers. Now, it's not mandatory, but they won't be able to make the end of the race on fuel.
Unless they're doing something dodgy with their fuel tank capacity, which
yes.
We saw a couple of the Ford GTA teams getting excluded from this year's Le Mans 24-hour for fuel tank capacity breaches. But actually, these cars have been quite successful in the World Endurance Championship. And in fact, if you go back to 2016, when the current spec Ford GTA cars made their debut, actually took out the GTA Pro Class in the Le Mans 24-hour in the hands of Sebastian Bourdais, Joey Hand, and Dirk Muller. And we've seen lots of other high-profile drivers driving these cars in endurance races all over the world, including the likes of Richard Westbrook, Mario Franchitti, Andy Prio, and our very own Ryan Briscoe. And we're going to have some very, very good online and real-world drivers testing their limits in these Ford GTs this evening.
Most certainly. Now, it's going to be a pace lap, so we'll run the full pace lap here around Watkins Glen. And we have our grid up on screen for today's event. This is your top 8, and it's Jackson Suzlin-Harlow, a rising star in the sim racing world, and he takes pole position ahead of Joshua Rogers. Now, Rogers just won $30,000 in iRacing's Elite Porsche Esports Super Cup World Championship. He's also the championship leader in the Supercars E-Series 2. Ferris Stanley will start on the second row. He's, of course, a driver from Indonesia. So Lachlan, Ferris Stanley, Nick Foster on the second row. Good to see a driver. Very few internationals out there today, away from Australia and New Zealand, but it's good to see one on the second row.
And Nick Foster then, the highest placed of the pro drivers or the real-life drivers, the former Carrera Cup Australian champion who's been doing a lot of racing in the Asia region in GT cars. And out of grid position number 5, the driver who last week became the first 2-time race winner in the Just Send It series, Cooper Webster.
So we'll cycle through the rest of the grid on screen and talk about any other notable names, of course. The ever-quick Webster and Albert starting on the third row. Ferraris, a previous winner, of course, in Just Send It previous weeks ago. And then we flow through to the rest of the order, of course. Emerson Harvey, Australian Formula 4 driver. And Scott Andrews is a driver, Lachlan, that you're ever so familiar with.
Indeed, a driver who cut his teeth in Commodore Cup and Formula 4 here in Australia in the late 2000s and early 10s, and then headed off overseas to chase the racing dream over in America and has had lots of recent success, particularly in prototype cars. Great to have him part of the Just Send It series this evening.
Down through the rest of the order, beyond the 16th position, Justin Ruggia, Super 2 driver. Hopefully to make the step up to Supercars soon enough. He'll start from 18th. And Mia Ott down there in 24th, just behind Steve Owen. Behind them, of course, will be our... I mean, we have a lot of drivers out there. Now, if you're new to the series, of course, 58 drivers in total. Now, the beauty of the series, Lachlan, is that we have a different car and track combination each week. It's revealed to the drivers 24 hours before the race, so they're very limited on practice. And, of course, it's all in a bit of fun here. And it's there's no serious competition, but you get a lot of the real-world drivers taking a break from their commitments and having a bit of a blast here on a Tuesday evening. Yeah,
we saw there Dylan O'Keefe coming off the back of his surprise debut in the Virgin Australia Supercars Championship for Gary Rogers Motorsport. He'll start out of grid position 26. Nathan Hearn, the TA2 driver, he's part of the field this evening as well. So a couple of very good real-world drivers inside the top 30 positions on the grid. And looking a bit further down the order, some very good sim races, the likes of Bailey Sweeney, Jay Cool, and also Job Stewart buried back in the pack, which just shows you how high the quality is in this field this evening.
And this is bizarre right now, so it's off screen. I'm just having a look at one of our onboard cameras, but Josh Rogers, who was supposed to start from the front row, pulled off to the side of the racetrack, and now he's on screen there. He's rejoined the front row, so that was very bizarre as we go through the rest of the order. Like we said, 58 drivers out there, and it'll be 40 minutes of racing action coming up for Rogers. Very bizarre to see. Now, of course, before we begin this race, we must thank series sponsors, The Hype Project, Wolf Chester, Vantage Freight, GB Galvanizing, Simworks, and of course, JAC Technologies. You can see them at the bottom right-hand side of the screen. That Porsche safety car will pull in any moment now, and we're about to commence. Just Send It here for week 11 from Watkins Glen International as we ride on board with Harlow.
Hold your breath, everybody, because we're about to have a full field of 58 3.5-litre twin-turbocharged V6 engines roaring into action as the field assembles in side-by-side rolling start formation coming out of the final corner.
Harlow floors it, and we go green from Watkins Glen. And already a mad scramble to turn one. What a sight that is here to begin lap 1 of our 40-minute event. And you'll see drivers running wide there. That's going to be completely legal. It's all within the rules. Now they're going to form up through the S's. Now Lachlan, this is the best overtaking spot on the circuit. I wouldn't be surprised if we see 4 wide at the beginning.
It's a very tight complex heading up the hill there through turns 2, 3 and 4, and you can see already the drivers ducking left and right, trying to gain an advantage by getting the toe from the car in front. Look at them all jockeying for position, trying to take advantage of each other's slipstream while at the same time trying to break the slipstream of the cars behind through the carousel. Turn number 5 they come on this opening lap. It's all looking fairly tidy so far.
And cool conditions out there, so it's going to take these tyres a bit of time to warm up. And already some cars into the wall there. Some of these Fords are taking a beating. That's Glen Wood, unfortunately. His race already taking a turn for the worst. And Supercars E-Series driver Brenton Hobson into the barrier.
Josh Rogers challenging on the outside of Jackson Suzlin Harlow. He'll look to do the over and under as they head up into the final couple of corners, turns 9 and 10. And Suzlin Harlow had to take a defensive line there to make sure that Josh Rogers had no opportunity to slip down the inside.
We rode on board with Ferris Stanley there through this section of the racetrack where it's almost impossible here in these final 2 corners to go too wide. But I didn't say it was impossible. We've seen it happen throughout the past. Here is Rogers, though, searching for the lead. He had a peek there, and that may have sent Harlow a little deep into the corner. And now Lachlan, let's have a look at this. This could be a switch for the lead.
So just confirming, you are allowed to run wide there over the exit curve at turn number 1, but it is going to open up the overtaking opportunity as they head back up the hill. They'll go side by side through the sweeping right-hander. Who gets the better run onto the back straight? I reckon that Josh Rogers has got the better exit speed. Will he be far enough ahead to sweep around the outside? He'll move to the extreme left and look to try and round up Suzlin Harlow. That's the long way around there. There's a spinner in the background as well. So a bit of chaos a bit further back in the pack, but Rogers has pulled it off around the outside through the carousel. And the multiple sim racing world champion goes through to take the top spot on lap 2.
He won 2 world championships this year, both in GTs and, of course, in the Porsches. And again today, he could prove unstoppable in Just Send It. Here's the modem simulation replay. Now we know Ferris Stanley had a spin. Goodness me, that's a car thrown. What is that, out of the barriers there? Goodness gracious, lucky it's virtual racing.
Gee whiz, that was seriously spectacular. And we saw a lot of this in practice, didn't we, Jonathan, where drivers were locking their rear brakes heading into turn 5, the carousel, and just rotating backwards off the circuit. And that's exactly what happened to Ferris Stanley there.
Yeah, of course, that's the beauty of virtual racing. You're all going to be safe. Problem is, their event is either over or taking a turn for the worse. This is Cooper Webster we ride on board with. Webster right behind the ever-quick Bo Albert. Albert is Australia's #1 rallycross driver, Lachlan, on the iRacing service.
This is a little bit different to rallycross, though, isn't it? In fact, compared to rallycross, you would have to say that this is extremely contrasting because you've got high aero cars on a very, very smooth, fast and flowing road course. But I suppose any sort of car control that you can learn from rallycross will still probably come in handy at some stage. Ethan Warren getting in on the action as well. Just coming back to the point that you made about drivers making mistakes, it's not ideal, but what we have seen is with the competition cautions, even if you do have a problem early in the race, it's not impossible to then recover if you can get the strategy right.
Oh, and that's Suzlin Harlow into the barrier. That's Jackson Suzlin Harlow in a scrap with Josh Rogers for the lead. And he may have some terminal suspension damage. Here's the modem simulation replay on screen. Lachlan, talk us through it.
So he was looking to try and come back at Josh Rogers. Oh, there was contact. The two cars made contact between one another, and that's what sent Suzlin Harlow into the barriers. That was at turn 8, I believe, just as you head up the hill into the final sequence of corners. And it was only the lightest of touches, but at the speed and the commitment level that they're carrying heading into the corner, that was enough to send Suzlin Harlow off into the wall.
And of course, that section known as the toe, the the succeeding corner known as the boot, as Rogers is in the pits now. He's completing the pit stop he needs to, Lachlan. This is very early in the race because I'm not sure if Rogers plays this right, I think he'll be okay to make the end of the race on fuel.
Yeah, it depends what the fuel range is for these cars, doesn't it? Now, we have seen that because of the competition caution and the fact that the pits close when the competition caution or the safety car is first deployed, you want to get your pit stop out of the way before that happens. So the early pit strategy's generally been the way to go, but the question that you have to ask for Josh Rogers is, can he make it on fuel? There's still 34 minutes remaining in the race at this point. You would think that a driver of his level of experience wouldn't miscalculate his fuel strategy.
So whilst you were beginning that sentence, Lachlan, we heard word from race control and Trent Harrison behind the scenes that Josh Rogers received a penalty for this collision with Jackson Suslin-Harlow for the lead. So what does that do now? It gives Bo Albert our P1 advantage.
Wow, so that was not a pit stop, that was a drive-through. So that means he'll have to come back in again. Oh, Aaron Hindle. Big spin off the road.
Goodness gracious, Justin Ruggia, again, the risks you can take in the virtual environment are certainly keeping these drivers a little honest here, but for Ruggia, not an incident he would normally be used to in the real world.
He was absolutely sent then by Blake Purdy, another driver with real-world experience in the miniature race car series. But we do have, for those of you joining us for the first time to watch this Just Send It series, 3 awards that get presented every week. So we have the best send, which is for the best successfully completed overtaking manoeuvre. We have the biggest failed send for the overtaking manoeuvre that's not successfully completed, and we also have the best postman award for the driver who makes up the most positions from where they started.
And currently Andrew Collins is up 32 positions from his starting spot, so if he doesn't get the best postie here already, I don't know who will as we ride on board with Webster.
Andrew Collins has been one of the most consistent drivers in Just Send It, yet to actually take a race victory, but he's been on the podium 3 times. Not only that though, he's also had 9 top 8 finishes from all of the races that we've had so far. So didn't qualify very well tonight, but he's charging his way up through the field. Here is Jackson Suslin-Harlow. I reckon he's managed to get away with that incident, Jonathan. We saw that he was in the barriers, but it doesn't look like it's done any damage because his car's still performing okay at the moment, and he's putting the pressure on Bo Albert for the lead of this race. He was half a second quicker last time through.
Yeah, the problem is, that rear wing certainly looks bent there. Let's have a look from the wide shot. Yeah, I definitely think the left side of that rear wing, where the car hit the barrier, seems to be some minor damage. I don't think it'll affect performance too much, Lachlan, like you said, but the problem is when you head into the pits in iRacing, sometimes that damage needs to be repaired and it can cost him vital few seconds. So he needs to get that stop out of the way before that competition caution.
Pit stop starting here. Dylan O'Keefe boxes the number 24 car. We've got Andrew Collins and Scott Andrews coming in as well. So we're into that critical moment of the race now where you can fill up and get home, and all of those drivers elected to get their pit stops over and done with so that once the competition caution falls, they're not going to be disadvantaged. But this is a ripper battle for the lead at the moment. Suslin-Harlow has gone through, so he has relieved Bo Albert of the lead. Cooper Webster, who you would have to say has been the form driver of the Just Send It series over the last few weeks. He's right in the thick of this battle as well, and so too is Ethan Warren. So an absolute cracker of a battle, and these top 4 cars are separated by just 7/10 of a second at the moment.
And Albert and Harlow are both teammates for Logitech G Altus Esports. Ethan Warren also a driver, part of Logitech G Altus Esports. Warren runs in 4th, so you have 3 Altus Esports cars in your top 3 positions, as we have 1 car stranded off into the grass there in the background. But the Altus Esports team and team owner Simon Feigl, Lachlan, to begin this race in the first 10 minutes, you have to say he's probably quite content with that.
And we're hearing as well that there's been an incident in the pits, or from a driver on his way into the pits. Gary Hamilton, a little bit further back, so he was outside the top 40. Oh, there's actually
goodness.
been contact between a couple of cars on their way into pit lane. Dear oh dear, it's a bit of a tricky pit entry because of the fact that you are carrying a fair bit of speed through that 11th and final corner, and unfortunately Gary Hamilton's just misjudged his pit entry there and ended up rotating on the way into the lane.
So, not the best of pit entries, of course. And Watkins Glen's pit entry isn't, you know, it's an old circuit. It's been around for almost 70 years, but it's not the best pit entry to handle, and it's definitely not the first incident and not the last we'll ever see at this circuit.
Oh, it's Ethan Warren, who was in 4th position. We just saw at the back of the shot there. He was staying right with the lead pack, but he's just spun himself out of contention. Let's have a look at what happened from the onboard shot. So he was in behind Cooper Webster. He's clipped the curb on the inside. That's unsettled the car, and he's gone spearing backwards off the racetrack.
So that looks like some lift-off oversteer, which is, again, it's more, there, Lachlan, it's more about controlling the car, isn't it, with your feet and the pedals than it is about the steering.
And a bit like a Porsche as well, with the weight distribution of these cars. Maybe not quite to the same extreme as some of the Porsches, but with a fair bit of weight over the rear wheels, if you do lose the rear end, it can become a bit like a pendulum and swing you around. So that's the other thing that can catch out unwary drivers. Oh, and we've had another shunt. This is coming out of turn number 10. That's Jackson Callow, so he was running just outside the top 10 at the time, and his day is done.
So here's a replay of something else in the background. We're watching Scott Andrews here. Now, what's happened to Scott Andrews, or was there an incident behind him I just saw, heading into what's known as the chute, the entrance into this boot section. But Scott Andrews looks okay here on the modem simulation replay. Unless it's... So let's have a look here. This is the carousel, the famous carousel of Watkins Glen. And there's a chance that... Is he the one that lost it here? No, it was a driver ahead of him. So Glenwood was a driver involved there, but there was somebody else involved. Now, the difficult part about this series, there's Glenwood on screen. Difficult part about this series, Lachlan, is that because we run different cars each week, we have to memorize 60 different liveries each week to 60 drivers.
And just to make our task that much harder this week, a lot of the field has elected to go for the Chip Ganassi factory team livery. So it makes it very difficult to differentiate between cars when you've got so many that look so similar.
Oh, goodness. And we'll somehow manage our way through it. Now, I'm looking at the time at the top left-hand side of the screen, if you're keeping track of that. We normally get that competition caution out at around now to the next 10 minutes. So expect that before the end of the race. And that could definitely play to the advantage or to the disadvantage of some drivers. Now, depending on who hasn't pitted, they'll need to jump into the box now. One of those drivers is Cooper Webster. He's decided to enter his box early.
It could be a very smart move for Cooper Webster. In the last couple of weeks, he has absolutely nailed his strategy. So electing to come in, electing not to risk staying out on the racetrack and being trapped by the competition caution. Up until that point, the highest place of the cars that had done a pit stop was Blake Neck. He's currently in position 16. We're right. Sorry, we're right.
You're right. And Cooper Webster's a driver who did win the last couple of weeks here at Just Ended, as Lachlan said. He's gunning for 3 in a row from Watkins Glen. This is Andrew Gilliam here, right behind his Andrew compatriot of Mr. Collins. Oh, and that's going to be 2x2 through turn number 1. And somehow, I think it was Andrew Collins, somehow found his way past.
Continuing his charge up through the field. And Dylan O'Keefe's just a couple of spots ahead of Andrew Collins, and they're really good mates off the track as well. So it'll be interesting to see what happens if Andrew Collins and Dylan O'Keefe start battling against one another.
Now, while that's taking place here, we see a couple of sends into the carousel here. One driver taken to the high line, just staying completely out of it here in that factory Ford livery. I'm having a look at our leaders coming across the pit straight. They have not entered the pit lane. Scott Andrews, we ride on board with him, and that was awfully close.
It's always a bit of an awkward time for some of these faster cars that have chosen to do an early pit stop and have to work their way through some of the slower cars and drivers who have not yet pitted, and it's probably one of the riskiest stages of the race. So Scott Andrews and Andrew Collins, they need to be aggressive enough to not lose time. Oh, we've got a big shunt for Steve Owen. Upside down coming out of turn 10, I think that is. And his night will be done. Gee whiz, that looks like a massive shunt.
Yep, that supercars driver in the real world, Steve Owen, and you'll be glad that this is the virtual world, and it was involved. He was involved with the 507 car, and that was Mitch McLeod. Mitch McLeod, a very quick sim racer himself, and both those drivers, and just rejoining there was a challenge at that portion of the racetrack.
Is that nominee for biggest failed send of the night?
Yeah, I think you got it. Would you give it to him? I think so. So far.
Mitchell McLeod, he was going for the move on Steve Owen there in what would have been a very difficult part of the track to pull it off, and it didn't quite come off, you would have to say.
Yeah, so that's definitely a failed send for sure. As we watch here. This is Albert and Harvey, is it? Goodness gracious, it is. Oh, it's Foster and Harvey, excuse me, the graphic deceived me. So Foster and Harvey here battling for the final podium position. And they head through the final couple of corners with Harvey ending up worse off. Now, Harvey was in fourth to begin this lap, so he hasn't lost out any positions. He just hasn't gained for the moment. Jackson, Suzlin, Harlow in the pit lane, and Harvey joins him. And that is some crucial pit stops right now, because we wait for Albert and Foster, and of course Ferris Stanley to make their pit stops. And if that caution comes out in the next 50 seconds, these drivers will be stranded in the lead.
Indeed, the bulk of the field has now taken their stop, so the only cars that haven't stopped yet, Bo Albert, Nick Foster and Ferris Stanley, everybody else has taken their stop, so we're not far away from having a corrected race order.
Yeah, but if you're new to iRacing or new to the pace car system on iRacing, these drivers need to be in the pit lane when that caution comes out. They cannot take to the pit lane once the safety car is released, and this Cody Bircher taking a scenic route through turn number one. Andrew Gilliam and Dylan O'Keefe here through turn one. Oh, you couldn't separate them by a matter of inches only. And O'Keefe here behind. The Super 2 driver now made his debut over the weekend in the Supercar Series at Gold Coast. And right now, he's going to be ever so brave here on the main straight, but he doesn't seem to be picking up a good draft.
Might just be enough, though. He's actually managed to get a bit of a tow as they head down towards the end of the straight, but Andrew Gilliam taking the mega defensive line there, driving it right down the inside of the road to make sure that O'Keefe had no chance of getting past. And the problem here for O'Keefe is he's got a couple of very quick drivers behind him, including Michael Healy and also Josh Rogers. Now, Josh Rogers has scored on our timing as having done a pit stop, but I think that was the drive-through penalty that he served earlier on, so I'm pretty sure that Josh Rogers is probably going to have to come back in again and take on fuel. But look at the racecraft from Josh Rogers. He just splits the field, shoots straight up the middle of two other cars. Oh, Nick Foster has spun out of position number 3, coming out of the final corner on the main straight, and he's going to have to rejoin in front of traffic that's got a full head of steam. That's weird. What a weird incident. They're not even at a corner at that part of the racetrack. What on earth has happened there?
Well, we'll get some context here. Oh, he's already clipped the barrier out of the corner, and he's basically had 2 incidents in one exit of the final corner there for Nick Foster, and that actually demoted him from the lead because Bo Albert entered the pit lane, and he's now come out ahead here of teammate Jackson Suzlin Harlow. They're alongside each other for the lead here, with 20 minutes remaining in Just Send It. Now, we know the pace car hasn't come out, but right now, Suzlin Harlow, with warmer tyres, albeit 1 lap older, he reclaims that P1 advantage effectively.
This is shaping up to be a really good battle to the end of the race. Cody Bircher there sitting in 8th position, and look at this 4 wide. This is not going to work. One of these drivers is going to have to yield. That's Scott Andrews is involved in that battle. A couple of them running very wide right off the racetrack. And Dylan O'Keefe might be the big beneficiary here as they get to the next left-hander. Can he sneak up the inside? Not quite. He's been stuck under the rear wing of the Michael Hanley car for a couple of laps now. Andrew Gillingham's actually moved forward. He's actually made up several more positions since we were last checking in with that battle.
Yeah, and Andrew Collins, the other Andrew, started 51st, now in the 16th. If I do the math there, what is that, 35 positions already this race? Lachlan, incredible.
He's 37, so he's
37,
well and
Jesus.
truly, he is well and truly on target to pick up the Best Postman award if he continues his forward momentum.
Oh, and there's the pace car. So the pace car is now out officially. You can see the yellow lights on the racetrack. And finally, for Ferris Stanley, he is the only driver who didn't enter the box here. Now, it looks like Nick Foster was already in the pit lane. Played that to perfection despite the spin. But it looks like Jackson Suzlin-Harlow will be our effective leader. I don't think there's any chance for Ferris Stanley in the lead right now to make the end of the race on this tank of fuel.
No, so he's going to be trapped as the Lone Ranger, isn't he? And that's going to completely ruin his strategy. So it's very unfortunate for Ferris Stanley that everybody else in the field has done their pit stops, because he's going to lose a lot of track position when the race goes green. Once again, just confirming as well that Josh Rogers did come in for his second pit stop just before the safety car was deployed, and he's currently sitting in position 24.
So Josh Rogers there. This is like Sebring, Lachlan, isn't it? Josh Rogers, remember, had some issues in Sebring. And for him, what happened to him? He ended up making his way up through the order. Now, I can't remember where exactly he finished, but he certainly finished inside the top 10.
He charged through in the final stint, so you're right. He ended up outside the top 20 once the pit stops were complete, and that was because he chose not to pit before the safety car came out, but he was able to fight his way back through the field with a combination of strong pace and stunning racecraft. Not that we ever expect anything less from Josh Rogers, of course. There he is in the virtual racing school number 92 car.
Now, for context, Josh Rogers also did win race number 1, week 1 of Just Send It for this season. And there's been a multitude of race winners, of course, in this series as we form up the field here through our pace lap. Now, of course, we've had 10 different winners. We've had 10 winners, of course, over our 10 weeks. Now, Lachlan, look at the amount of talent we have there. Two of the best sim racers in the world in Josh Rogers and Jared Filsell. And then they're mixed with the real world. Of course, Shane Van Gisbergen winning in the Audi at Monza.
Cody Bircher as well. That was a really good race at Road America in the Aston Martin where he took victory. We following on from the announcement that TCR cars would race at Bathurst in real life next year, though we decided to have a TCR race at Bathurst in the virtual world to give everybody an idea of what it would be like. And in a thrilling last lap battle, Thomas Hinds came out on top after a door-to-door fight against Job Stewart down Conrod Straight. Quite appropriately, it was Dominic Ferraris who was victorious in the Ferrari at Road Atlanta, and Cooper Webster, the last couple of weeks, became the first double winner of Just Send It, picking up back-to-back race victories at Sebring in the Mercedes, and then at the Belle Isle in Detroit driving the Pro Lights truck.
And that was quite an insane event. It was something I hope we do again here at Just Send It. Now, are you a betting man, Lachlan? Because Webster is in 16th. You think he can three-peat coming into Watkins, Glen?
So I'm just looking at the timing, and he's done a second pit stop, so not quite sure what the story is there. But I think with we're just hearing from race control that he actually got a penalty, Cooper Webster. So all things considered, 16th is not such a bad position for him to be in. But I think given the quality of the drivers that he's going to be having to fight his way past, I think it might be a pretty tall order for him to move all the way to the front within the final quarter of an hour of this race.
So right now, the field is basically forming up like this. We have our lap cars making their way through. They're being waved around the pace car. Ferris Stanley leads, but we're expecting Ferris Stanley to enter the pit lane and make his one and only stop for the day. Now, that could be now, so we'll keep an eye on it. There's Ferris Stanley first in line behind the Porsche pace car. And Ferris Stanley is going to enter the pit lane, and that means that Suzlin-Harlow will snatch that lead. Well, quite uneventfully. It was like candy from a baby, and he'll be joined by teammate Bo Albert. They'll be P1 and 2.
So just having a look at the best lap times that have been achieved by our main front runners. So Jackson Suzlin Harlow's had a best lap time of 1:39.0. Bo Albert in second has achieved 1:39.1. So not that much difference in the peak lap speed between the top two. Blake Neck, who sits in position 3, has done a 39.3. So too has Matt Morris. And Ross Rizzo in 5th position has done a 1:39.2. So when you compare the best lap times of the top 5 drivers, there's only 0.3 of a second separating them. And that is an indication to me that we're going to be set for a pretty enthralling sprint to the line once this race goes green again. Any one of those top 5 drivers has got the speed to win this race. It's going to come down to racecraft and track position and who can pull off the best sends, I reckon.
Yeah, exactly. And if you're interested in getting involved, of course, get yourself an iRacing subscription. Visit iRacing.com and you can join in on all the action. We're still trying to fund Lachlan Mansell alongside me a steering wheel because you've been involved in the motor racing world your entire life, but we're trying to get you in the virtual environment too.
Well, you'll be pleased to know I do have a steering wheel and pedals, and I do actually have a pretty decent PC. What I haven't really had much of lately has been time. So in the off season, I am going to dedicate some time to cutting some laps on iRacing.
That's it. Your life's over, mate. You're going to get addicted to it. You're going to be right. Well, what's the first car track combo you're going to look into? This one?
Well, I actually had a go on Dylan O'Keefe's sim a few weeks ago, and I tried a few cars there. I raced a TCR car at Phillip Island and a supercar at Bathurst, and I also had a go in a sprint car on a speedway as well. But
good choices.
I am a fan of longer distance endurance races in real life, and that probably carries over to sim racing as well. So I reckon it'd be one of these GTE style cars that I'm going to most enjoy.
And of course, on the iRacing service and in the sim racing universe, there's been plenty of endurance racing and team racing going on, of course. Even the Daytona 24, Le Mans 24, don't forget. The first ever 24-hour event on iRacing was the Spa 24 back in 2014. We've had Petit Le Mans only as recently as a few weeks ago at Road Atlanta. And the beauty of this, of course, is that wherever you are in the world, you can experience the world's best racetracks out here from your own room at home. Now, the pace car lights are out, and we're about to go green again soon enough. Now, if you're Susan Harlow, Lachlan, I'd floor it at the apex of the final corner, while Bo Albert's still steering in.
I agree with you. He needs to time this restart to perfection and try and gain any advantage that he can, because the key thing is going to be trying to break the toe of the cars behind. So, safety car just about to pull into pit lane. Jackson Suzlin Harlow yet to win a race in the Just Send It series, but he has been on the podium in a GTE car. He was third in the very first race in the Just Send It series at Mid-Ohio in week 1 as we get set for a restart. 11 and a half minutes to go to decide who will be the winner of week 11 of Just Send It here at Watkins Glen.
Now, we should mention, third in line was Gary Hamilton. He's a lapped car, and he's getting in the way here. Blake Neck, Ross Rizzo, Matt Morris somehow make their way past. Ross Rizzo up a position past Morris as a Triple Eight car had some issues. Oh, and there could be a pile up here through the S's. They're going to have to be careful on this restart. Oh, and here we go. The big one's occurring.
Goodness gracious me, that's going to decimate the field. Look at that. Absolute pandemonium. And there goes Cooper Webster's chances of a double victory. They're over and out. He's been caught up in that accident. Absolute chaos, absolute carnage, absolute mayhem. And if you were in the front running pack, then you just got very lucky. Oh no, there's been another incident as they negotiate their way down into the section of the circuit affectionately known as the boot. But goodness me, that was a massive pile-up, and that is going to severely compromise the chances of a large percentage of this field.
So 10 minutes remaining and Just Send It. Now, it's all in a bit of fun here and a bit of a stress release on a Tuesday night, but we never like to see an accident of that multitude. And there's a spin at the back of the pack. You just saw it off screen. Everybody's doesn't seem like anyone was harmed too much as they go 3 wide to rejoin the NASCAR portion of the circuit. That's quite bizarre to see. Oh, and more incidents down the back of the pack. There's the number 3 off into the barriers of Dominic Ferraris.
So drivers involved in that massive pile-up that we saw include, I'm not going to have time to list them all, but Dylan O'Keefe was involved, Nick Foster, Cooper Webster, Michael Hammond, Steve Owen got involved in as well, Michael Rosenblatt, Christian Lindbaum. So, yeah, massive carnage there, unfortunately.
Nevertheless, though, we still have a race for the lead, and the 2 teammates of Jackson Suzlin-Harlow and Bo Albert are separated by a few tenths of a second. JSH in the lead. It looks like his teammate's going to sit tight here. And what a brilliant shot that is, as you can see here at Watkins Glen. But Albert here is going to remain content. Now, of course, in sim time, it's currently 8 p.m. in the evening, so we're approaching sunset at the moment, Lachlan, but we should wrap up this race before then.
I just read you through a list of drivers who got involved in that incident, but I'm going to mention a couple of drivers who managed to stay out of it. Josh Rogers is up to 9th position, and Ferris Stanley, even despite that disadvantage of being trapped behind the safety car during that competition caution, is back up in the top 10. So both those drivers managed to steer clear of the carnage, and they've both benefited enormously just by staying out of trouble.
And that man, Josh Rogers, that Lachlan mentioned, currently has 12 seconds to make up on the next place driver ahead of him of Blake Neck. You can see the empty road for the VRS Coanda Sim Sport driver. One of the best teams in sim racing. Oh, goodness, he's got damage to the front end. So missing the bonnet is Rogers. And unfortunately, his day not going to get any better, I'd say, from 9th, unless the drivers ahead collide. But now we look at Albert and Suzlin-Harlow, and we'll see if any of them make a move here. I don't think I see... Where's Warren? Warren's nowhere near.
So Bo Albert was a 10th quicker than Jackson Suzlin-Harlow on the previous lap. So he's got the pace to take the challenge up, but we're just hearing that Josh Rogers has retired from the race, no doubt, as a result of that damage. He's back in the pits. So coming down into the last corner, and he's just pulled in. So could have been that the damage was just too severe to be able to continue.
Yeah, so Rogers, or he possibly, I was going to say, when he entered, I thought maybe he entered because, remember, he had the penalty early on in the race. So I thought maybe it was in relation to that, but he's actually pretty much out of the event right now. That car's switched off. So for Rogers, his day is done. This is Cody Bircher in a scrap with that 888 car of Morris. Doesn't have too much time remaining, does he?
Cody Bircher's been very good in these just-centered events. He's always somewhere up near the front of the field, provided he doesn't get caught up in any incidents. He has been one of our just-centered race winners and goes very, very well in real-life racing in the Australian Formula Ford Championship as well, where he scored a race victory this season.
Now, if it's anyone in our top 3 that wins, whether it's JSH, Bo Albert, or even Matt Morris, we'll have a new winner for Just Send It. But if it's Cody Bircher here on screen, don't forget that Bircher did win the race for week 5 in the Aston Martin around Road America, located in Wisconsin in the United States of America. And he's already packing the pressure on, isn't he, there on Matt Morris, who's going to have the worst of exits, as we also watch Blake Neck here with a rapid getaway.
Just having a look at Cody Bircher's history in the series, and he does have a good record in these GT-style cars as well. He took the win in the Aston Martin at Road America, as you mentioned, but he was also on the podium in the Ferrari GT3 at Road Atlanta. As we see a change in third position, Cody Bircher making the move through on the inside of Matt Morris to pick up what will be the final podium position. More dramas at the carousel, this time involving Emerson Harvey.
Yeah, but that's Emerson Harvey, who races in Australian Formula 4. One of the step-up
Raced in Australian Formula 4 because Australian Formula 4, as you'd probably be aware, is no longer a thing.
Yes, excuse me. So, unfortunately for Harvey, he's off into the barrier with a heavy shunt there on the modem simulation replay. And nevertheless, though, don't make me laugh, Lachlan, please, with 5 minutes remaining. Who are we watching now? Blake Neck, Michael Healy. Blake Neck's ever quick sim racer. I know Lachlan, of course. He was at some big events last year. I remember I covered him at what was called the VSR Showdown, and he's quick in almost any tin top you put him in.
It's a pretty handy contest, actually. It's just such a shame that we lost so many cars with that big pile up just after the safety car restart, because then I reckon we would have been in for an absolute battle royale involving 20 plus cars. And in terms of the driver who's set to pick up the award for the best postman tonight, Race Low, who I know was very heavily involved behind the scenes of this series, has made up 46 positions, if you don't mind. He started this race 56th on the grid, and he's up to 10th. What a drive.
Let's make that sound a little better right now. He has damage to that Ford GTE, and of course he's done that in 36 minutes. So he's picked off more than a car a minute.
It's not bad. Mind you, I think quite a lot of the cars that he got past in the space of about 10 seconds.
Yeah, right there.
So, yeah.
Right in the S's, right up, going up the hill here. Oh, car into the barrier in the background. Not what you want to see at the end of the day. That was a car a lap down, of course. We still watch the scrap between Healy and Blake Neck. And what's going on? Was that bump drafting through the exit of a corner? Now, excuse me, that's Matt Morris. Morris was third. And now there's an issue going on for Morris here, Lachlan, because he's dropped a few positions in the space of a lap.
He was up, as you mentioned, inside a podium position a couple of laps ago, but since being overtaken by Cody Bircher, he's lost his momentum, and we've got Andrew Collins coming in for a pit stop. He was running in position 15 at the time, but probably a bit too much damage to that car. He was one of the drivers involved in that massive contretemps at the race start. So, Jackson Suzel and Harlow just managing the margin back to Bo Albert. Bo Albert, I would suggest, made a mistake on the previous lap because he was more than a second slower than Suzel and Harlow. The margin from first to second is now out to just over 2 seconds. Cody Bircher was a fraction quicker than Bo Albert on the previous lap, and Cody Bircher is just over 4 seconds behind the second place car at this stage. Good battles happening just outside the top 10 as well. Good to see Terry Nightingale back in sim racing. I know that he was one of the very early adopters of iRacing when it first came on the scene, and actually did a bit of commentary as well. Did some commentary and some racing in the real life world too, and he's had a young kid since then, and he's quite the family man these days, but good to see that he's getting involved in some sim racing action tonight.
Ironically, his name, Nightingale. You won't be getting any sleep at night with a few new kids. Everyone's experienced that, of course, but a brilliant gift for yourself and the world. Of course, congratulations to Terry. And Terry currently finds himself in the 12th position behind Christina Nasarik. Now, I mean, that's very impressive, by the way, by Reese Lowe's. Not only going to gain an immense amount of positions, 46, but he's also in the top 10. I think our battle for the lead here, with a minute remaining, it's pretty much almost done and dusted. Our leaders across the start-finish line. This should be the last lap of the race, Lachlan. So it's an unofficial white flag, as they like to call it in the US. But it looks like Susan Harlow has one more trip around Watkins Glen to take this victory.
It's been one of those races, hasn't it, tonight, where it's staying out of trouble has paid dividends. Now, we have seen in previous weeks that there have been a lot of incidents very early in the race. This week we managed to get through the first half of the race without any of the big pile-ups that we have seen in previous weeks, but all hell broke loose after that safety car restart. And in many ways, it just shows you the value of having track position, doesn't it? If you're up the front, if you're out of the cut and thrust of the mid-pack, it means that you're less vulnerable to being caught up in drama, as we see one car go spearing off into the time wall there. It was a side-by-side battle. That was Blake Neck and Ross Rizzo were involved in that contest, and I think it might have been a laps car that just got speared out into the fence, and Michael Healy and Matt Morris continuing their squabble over positions 6 and 7 as well.
So we ride on board with Morris, and he won't have too long to go here before the end of the race. But for Jackson Suzel Harlow, he's coming out of the boot right now. He'll have a couple more corners to go, and he will be our newest winner of Just Send It here on the SimSpeed Esports Network, and of course broadcasting on our associated platforms, including Motorsport TV. How about this, though? Looking to make a formation finish is Susan Harlow, possibly. He's going to remain behind Albert. He wins week 11 from Watkins Glen.
Loving the Le Mans style formation finish there with the headlights ablaze on both of those cars. So he takes the win from pole position as well. Very, very good job there from Susan Harlow. Albert second. Cody Bircher picks up his third podium finish in just centered in third position. And then it's Ross Rizzo back to Blake Neck, Michael Haley, Matt Morris. Good job by Ferris Stanley as well, despite the strategy disadvantage. Managed to get back up to 8th position at the finish. Nia Ott in 9th spot. And Race Slow, 56th on the grid, up to 10th position. There is no doubt whatsoever that he's going to walk away from tonight with the best postman honours.
Most certainly, and we're still racing here with Job Stewart and Terry Nightingale. And Nightingale getting sideways and into the barrier is Nightingale. Somehow, though, across the final corner, it looks like they made contact. Nightingale still going to remain in 12th, and Stewart will come home in 13th. Now, a damage bill, luckily virtually, and we're going to see some exciting crashes here across the line with our field. But just some unnecessary contact, but all in a bit of fun here for Just Send It on a Tuesday night.
Job Stewart tried to get down the inside of Nightingale, and he just about had the move done, but he got a bit physical with Nightingale, not too impressed, I don't think, and moved back across to ensure that Job Stewart wasn't able to out-drag him on the run to the line.
Oh, what a finish that was. Let's have a look at our final race results. Those are our winners turned upside down. It's a tradition we see here at Just Send It. Why not just send it into the barriers after the race, and they keep doing that here in the background. So whilst we try not to laugh at the Destruction Derby, we'll look at our winner, and that was JSH Jackson Susan Harlow, who took his first victory in the Just Send It series, and a brilliant one, of course, for the Logitech G Altus Esports team. His teammate followed him in second on the podium. Cody Bircher, a previous winner, still ended up with a good podium, and as Lachlan Mansell, alongside me, said during the race, one of the most consistent performers in this series. So it's good to see him back on to the podium, of course. Then it was Rizzo and Neck rounding out the top 5, and Ferris Stanley at the end of the day came home a long way behind in 8th. And we'll cycle through the order, of course. And Lachlan, there's your man, Reese Lowe, and also partner of the series, Reese Lowe, who's, thanks to him for all his hard work behind the scenes to get this series done, ends up with a brilliant 10th position.
Just outside the top 10, Christina Nazarick in 11th spot ahead of Terry Nightingale, who picks up his best result so far in the Just Send It series. Job Stewart 13th, Jack Widdus back to Andrew Gillingham in 15th position, and Andre Burrell in 16th spot.
And then whilst we cycle through the rest of the field, Andrew Collins at the end of the day only ended up 19th, but still made up a lot of positions there after starting, of course, outside your top 50. Look how many DNFs there were, Lachlan, at the end of the day. Because Josh Rogers, who retired, still ended up unclassified or classified as 31st. Goodness.
So I reckon that crash after the race start eliminated about half the field. It was just a massive pile-up that involved so many cars, and it was such a shame, mainly because of the quality of drivers that were involved in that incident. People like Dylan O'Keefe, Scott Andrews, Cooper Webster, drivers who would have been very much capable of fighting it out for a top 5 or even a podium position had that drama not occurred. So, bit unfortunate that we saw that, but every edition of Just Send It so far, in the weeks that we've seen, has thrown up a different storyline, hasn't it? Be different strategies or really good battles or wheel-to-wheel racing. It never fails to deliver. And once again, it has produced a thriller for us this evening.
So like I always ask you at the end of every race this season, Lachlan, any lessons learnt from this round? Yet again, a race of attrition coming into a circuit that promotes overtaking. But of course, next week, I guess when you have 24 hours to practice, it's all about hammering down as many laps as you can in those 24 hours.
I think probably the biggest lesson from tonight was there's an expression that you can't win the race on the first lap, but you can certainly lose it. But I think the other lesson is that you can't win the race on the first lap after a safety car restart, but you can certainly lose it.
Yep, exactly. And if I'm going to add anything to that, I'd say, I mean, like I said before, actually, probably just get as much laps as you can. And that's the beauty, of course, of virtual racing. And, of course, Lachlan, that's why a lot of real drivers are now starting to get themselves a cockpit and starting to get themselves on iRacing and any other simulator out there so that they can just keep their driving skills honest.
A big thank you as well to everybody in the wider motorsport community who has been tuning into our broadcasts. It was very exciting tonight to go live on motorsport.tv for the first time, and at all of the real-life racing events that I've been to. There's been lots of positive comments from people who've been tuning in and thoroughly enjoying all of the action. So a big thanks to everybody for their support, for watching racing that is proving to be just as entertaining, or in some cases even more entertaining than what you see in real life.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and of course, one more thank you we should say to the Hype Project, Wolfchester, Vantage Freight, GB Galvanizing, Simworks, and of course JAC Technologies. Now, if you want to follow the Just Send It series, give them a like on Facebook and check them out there. Now, it is time to wrap up here from the virtual commentary booth. The speedy talent you saw out here racing today will be back again for the next race on the 5th of November. That's in a week's time. And that will be for 40 minutes around a circuit and car combination that we don't know of. It'll be released 24 hours before the day of the event. The combo will host Week 12 action of Just Send It, broadcasted, of course, on the SimSpeed Esports Network. And welcome along to everybody for the first time who joined us here on Motorsport TV. We hope you enjoyed the coverage. Thanks to all of you guys, and thanks to Lachlan Mansell alongside me, Jay Kennedy behind the scenes in production, and the entire SimSpeed Esports Network crew behind the scenes that make this SimSpeed Esports Network presentation broadcasted on our associated platforms. Visit iRacing.com and, of course, the SimSpeed TV website for more information. Our winner today, Jackson Suzlin-Harlow for the Logitech G Altus Esports team. And we say so long from the Glen.
This is fantastic. This is GT racing right now.
He's got traction, he's going in the outside of both of them! Maloney!
Oh, he's taken Anderson. Anderson's up to
Oh
him.
my god! Big crash! Oh my goodness, half the field's gonna get rolled.
Second very close. These guys are want to make their way through the field very quickly.
Oh, here we go!
Oh no! That's massive!
This is it! This is over! I can't believe this! Oh my god!
God, what?